Alright, I am just going to start this video and get the burning question on everyone's mind out of the way. Is Venato Prime the new best melee influence melee or just melee in the game? No, it is not. But that does not mean that it is not a very fun weapon to use, because in this day and age where you can put influence on pretty much any weapon and then it becomes a room clear AoE nuke, you just need to swing once, Okina and Karnan type stuff, having a melee that can actually do something unique is pretty fun. It's why I made a video on the Harmony a couple of weeks ago, because that is a melee that's best build, doesn't use melee influence, and that makes it a lot more enjoyable to use in my opinion. And while Venato Prime is definitely best off using melee influence, there are some other builds you can use to take advantage of the unique trait that it has that nothing else can do, and still have respectable KPM on the steel path. To get the basics out of the way, the Venato Prime is a scythe, like the non-prime of course, and these are pretty standard. We've actually gotten a couple of these recently in the past couple of updates, and initially it might not appear like there is anything too special going on until you question why some of these enemies have this sort of blue energy radiating away from them. And that has to do with what makes this weapon actually unique, which would be its unique trait that states that on status effect, you inflict Tau status with a 50% additional combo count chance when wielded by Caliban. We don't care about the combo count stuff, but the inflicting Tau status is really interesting. Up until now, Tau has been a status that is completely isolated from every warframe in the game besides Caliban, as he is the only one who deals it innately, and there is no way to mod for it or anything like that. What Tau does is increase the status chance of things that are used against enemies with Tau by a certain number, beginning at 10% and going all the way up to 100%, which is reached by 10 stacks, 10% per stack as you would expect. What makes this effect so good is that this is not like if we were to mod on 100% more status chance through something like Weeping Wounds or whatnot. What these type of status chance benefits do is take your base status chance, which on the Venato Prime is 32%, and then since this stacks up all the way to 440%, we can say that we have 440% of 32 plus 32, which comes out to 172.8% status chance. But the benefit provided by Tau is flat, and means that our 32 would become 132 with 10 Tau stacks, and makes it a far more effective buff than anything else, because even though Weeping Wounds might not be the greatest example because it provides so much, something like a 60-60 mod only provides 60%, and that would only be 14%. So you can see the efficacy of having this available on our melee. And then in actual use, you will see that whenever we do trigger a status, the enemies do get Tau on them, and that will make them even more receptible to getting more statuses on them, and creates kind of an infinite loop of hitting a status makes them want to take more status damage, and then they take more statuses and deal more status damage. It's a pretty good loop. So what does this mean for how we actually want to build the Venato? Well, as one would expect, you can just build it for the traditional melee influence slop that we have all gotten very used to, and that setup just looks like this. Prime pressure point for the base damage because we only have electric. Reach gives us a good range of 5.8 meters. Bane mod to double dip on the electric, which comes from Voltaic Strike. The status chance here being complemented by Weeping Wounds and Elementalist. More status damage here, more crit chance and damage here, and then even more crit chance so that we have those higher tiers. Paired with Stalking Fan, which is the best stance on our sides, and melee influence, it is what you would expect from a modern day 2025 melee influence build, except it is just ever so slightly better. And I will explain why this might not be as effective as you are expecting it to be, because you might be thinking, okay, so it spreads Tau through melee influence, which would be incredible if that was actually the case of what happened. But as you can see, that isn't what happens. These enemies actually died a little bit too quickly, but I will spread some electric with melee influence. And, you know, this guy has Tau because I hit him. This guy doesn't have Tau because I only hit him with influence. Same with the rest of these enemies. So it means that if your goal is to just run through a big group like this and get a bunch of statuses, you're not going to get a ton more, because you have to strike that initial target and then stay on them to actually get the benefit. Because if this guy has 10 electric on him and also 10 Tau, then you would trigger a lot more statuses in a single swing on this enemy. So you want to stay on this guy, but that also leads us to the problem of he dies way quicker than everything else because he has statuses way higher than every other enemy. So while it does work and isn't bad, something like the Okina, the Nami Solo, the Thalys are just going to be better melee influence options, which leads me to using another melee arcane that I do really like but doesn't see much play, and that is Melee Vortex, which is functionally very similar to influence but works in a different way. Whereas influence states that you will just spread your damage in a certain radius, vortex is practically a vortex and will drag in enemies if they have a magnetic status on them when you kill them, pulling in everyone within an 18-meter radius, and this is a pretty quick pull. What this means is that we can be hitting every enemy that we would be hitting normally with influence with a normal swing of our Venato, And because we are actually directly hitting them and not through influence, we will trigger Tau on them and then get more statuses and even more statuses. And this is probably my preferred way to play with this melee because it's just not melee influence and also actually lets you take advantage of the unique trait instead of just completely ignoring it. But I will be honest and say that it isn't as good as just running this because it's probably one of the strongest setups in the game right now. To give a demonstration though, you do actually have to outsource the magnetic to a companion. I'm choosing Diriga because it is the best melee companion with the arc coil precept. And then even with no warframe buff still, once we get a magnetic on someone, so I will have to build up my combo to kill this person, but they all get dragged in and then we get to just start meleeing them up. Now, is this anywhere as fast as it would be if we were to use melee influence? No, it isn't, but it is a more enjoyable way to play it. And remember that I'm still using no warframe buffs right now. And even the setup that I am on for Kullervo right now is focused on using melee influence. Even with this, it will still absolutely break it. So, you know, you can use a more fun build with something like Kullervo or Citrine and get the efficacy of a melee influence build. If you want the intended setup for that though, this is what I'm using. It does actually use Viral instead of double modding Electricon here, because over on my Kullervo, I am using Shock with the Augment to get us a ton more electric damage, so we do not have to mod it on our melee directly. And then Viral is a damage multiplier that we will trigger a lot of, at least on the initial enemy and then any enemies that we spread Viral to from them. And as you saw before, when we're using things like Wrathful Advance and Shock, our damage just becomes absurdly high. Right there, I mean, I'm still at 2x combo. Like if I was at 12x, this would be way stronger, but we're still just destroying everything. So Venato works very well if you want to take using Kullervo as a measure of how good something is in this game, because clearly this is very balanced, right? This particular build is very, very simple. We are running maximum duration and maximum strength. We don't need efficiency because we never cast or rarely have to cast because of the high duration. Range is also not important. The only abilities that we use are our 1, 2, and 4. And our 2 keeps us alive infinitely because of its augment Volatile Recompense, which just makes it into a duration-based ability. Go watch my video on this one if you haven't seen it, because it makes Kullervo even better than he already is, and also allows him to use Arcane Truculence very easily, giving us even more viral. And we're never going to complain about that. Super high strength gives us a ton of crit chance on the melee. I think we have around 70% on it without Wrathful Advance. So now we are sitting just under 720%, which is kind of crazy. And like I said before, Shock is 322 and will last you a minute and a half. The companion for this one should be a Nautilus. You just want that grouping. The builds are pretty typical here, nothing crazy about them. Versus Prime for the priming and the crit chance for Tenacious. So Venato is really simple. You can either run melee influence on it, or you can actually enjoy yourself and use melee vortex. It is kind of up to you. Enjoy the gameplay. I will see you all very soon. Peace.